संसारदावा नललीढलोका त्रणाय कारुण्य घना घना त्वम् प्राप्तस्य कल्याण गुणार्णवस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् महाप्रभु के तन नृत्य गीता वाजित्रमाध्यन् मनसोरसेना रोमाञ्चकाम्पा श्रुतरङ्गबाजो वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् श्रीविग्रहाराधन नित्यनाना शृङ्गारतन्वन्दिरमजनादो युक्तश्च भक्तांश्च नियुञ्जतोऽपि वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् चतुर्विधा श्रीभगवत्प्रसाद स्वदन्नतृप्तान् हरिभक्तसङ्घम् कृत्यैव तृप्तिं भजत सदैव वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् श्रीराधिका माधवयोरपारा माधुर्यलीला गुणरूपनाम्ना प्रतिक्षण स्वधनलोलुपस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् निकुञ्जयो नो रतिकेलिसीधै यायलिभिर्योक्तिरपेक्षणीया तत्रातिदाक्षात् अतिवल्लभस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् साक्षाद्धरित्वेना समस्तशास्त्रे उक्तस्तथा भाव्यत एव शब्दी किन्तु प्रभुर्य प्रिय एव तस्य भगवत्प्रसादो यस्याप्यसादान्नगति कुतोऽपि ध्यायन्स्तु वंस्तस्य यशस्विसन्ध्या वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्द वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्द नमः ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमति भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादिसतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृन्द जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृन्द जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृन्द Hare Krishna जगन्नाथा बलदेवा सुभद्रा जय सुदर्शन जय सीताराम 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 जय लक्ष्मण हनुमान जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जय गौरनिताय 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 जय गौरनिताय जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव निताय गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल
जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस प्रव्राजकाचार्य स्तोत्र शिष्यमार इस्कॉन प्रतिष्ठा विविधि सांस्थापकाचार्य वैष्णव शिरोमणि गौर प्रियजन कृष्ण प्रेम भक्ति रत पतित पावन His divine grace अभचरविन भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी महाराज श्रील प्रभुपाद जी की जय श्री गौर्य गुरु वर्ग पतित उद्धार की जय श्री रूप सनातन भक्त रघुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल भक्त दास गुण सद्गोस्वामी प्रभु की जय नामाचार्य शील हरिदास ठाकुर जी की जय अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री द्वैत गदाधर शिवासरि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय जय परम दयाल श्री नित्यानंद प्रभु की जय जय प्रेम नाम संकीर्तन एक जनक प्रेम पुरुषोत्तम श्री सच्चिनंदन श्रीमन गौरंग श्री चैतन्य महाप्रभु गौर हरि अवतार की जय गोलोकेर प्रमधान हरि नाम संकीर्तन यज्ञ की जय युग धर्म हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय बृहद निदांग ट्वेंस दैनतुर्भोग डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन सेवा की जय शिष्य राधा कृष्ण गोपुन राधा कुंद श्यामकुंद गिरिराज गोवर्धन की जय शिव वृंदावन मथुरा धाम की जय डेल शिव श्री राधांजल माधव की जय श्री मायापुर नवद्वीप एक चक्रधाम की जय परम करुण श्री गौर निताय की जय श्री पुरुषोत्तम कित्र जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय श्री जगन्नाथ स्वामी बलदेव प्रभु श्रीमती सुभद्रा देवी सुदर्शन चक्र भगवान की जय भक्ति सर्व विघ्न विनाशन करें श्रृंगारी भगवान की जय जय गंगा माई जमुना माई की जय तुलसी महारानी वृंदी देवी भक्ति देवी की जय बोलो श्री मथुरा रानी की जय समवेत भक्त वृंद की जय निताय गौर परमानंदे all glories to the assembly bodies all glories to the assembly bodies all glories to the assembly bodies all glories to Shri Guru Shri Gauranga.
नमस्ते नरसिंहाय
Namaste Narasingaya
प्रह्लादलाददायिने प्रह्लादलाददायिने हिरण्यकाशीपूर्वक्षः हिरण्यकाशीपूर्वक्षः शिलटङ्कानकालाये शिलटङ्कानकालाये इतो नरसिंहो परतो नरसिंहो इतो नरसिंहो परतो नरसिंहो यतो यतो यामि ततो नरसिंहो यतो यतो यामि ततो नरसिंहो बाहे नरसिंहो हृदये नरसिंहो बाहे नरसिंहो हृदये नरसिंहो नरसिंहमदिं शरणं प्रपदे नरसिंहमदिं शरणं प्रपदे तव करकमलवरे नाथाम् अद्भुतशृङ्गादलिता हिरण्यकशिपो तनुभृङ्गां केशवद्रीता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे तव करकमलवरे नाथा अद्भुतशृङ्गादलिता हिरण्यकशिपो तनुभृङ्गां केशवद्रीता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे केशवद्रीता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे केशवद्रीता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय नरसिंहदेव 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 जय भक्ता प्रहलाद 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 नित्य गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल नित्य गौर हरि बोल भक्ति विघ्न विनाशक लक्ष्मी नरसिंह स्वामी की जय भक्त शिरोमणि प्रहलाद महाराज की जय शिल प्रभुपाद की जय
Shri Vrindayi Tulasi Devai Piyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradeve Sattavataye Namo Namaha वृंदाई तुलसी दिवाई प्रिय के सब सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रद देवे सत्य बताए मनमा वृंदाई तुलसी देवाई प्रिय के सब सत्य कृष्ण भक्ति प्रद देवे सत्य बताए मनमा जय श्रीमती तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी की जय। You wanted to do it? Oh. Sorry for getting the keys.
Namo Namaha Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namaha Namo Namaha Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namaha
Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namaha
Radha Krishna Seva Pabo Abhilashi
Radha Krishna Seva Pavo Abhilashi
Radha Krishna Seva Pabo Abhilashi तुम्हारे शरण लो तारा वंश पूर्ण हो
ये तुम्हारा शरण तारा पंच पुना
कृपा कोरी को रोता रे वृंदावन वासी
तुम्हें कृपा
दास कोई नमूना होय
जिन कृष्ण दास कोई नमूना
श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेम सदाए नवासी
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 नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः
यानि कानि च पापानि प्रमात्याधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे
यानि कानि पापानि प्रमात्याधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति
यानि कानि च पापानि प्रमात्याधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे
यानि कानि पापानि प्रमात्याधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्मत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे हरे कृष्ण हरे कृष्ण हरे 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 राम हरे राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी जय वृंदा देवी जय वृंदा देवी जय वृंदा देवी जय वृंदा देवी
Shri Vrindai Tulasi Bai Priya Ke Saba Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradi Devi Satya Bhataye Namah Vrindai Tulasi Bai Priya Ke Saba Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradi Devi Satya Bhataye Namah Vrindayai Tulasi Devi Priyayai Ke Saba Satya Krishna Bhakti Pradi Devi Satya Bhataye Namah Jeshmati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. O Tulasi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you has wishes fulfilled. Bestow your mercy upon him you make him resident of Vrindavana. My desire is that you also grant me a residence in pleasure groves of Shri Vrindavan Dham. Thus, within my vision, I will always behold the beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower with them, Mrs. Ovraj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me unmet servant. This very fallen and lowly servant, Krishna, please. May I always sing with love Shri Radha and Govinda. Srimati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. So now let's look into the 10 offenses against the chanting with the Harinam. 10 offenses against chanting the holy name of the Lord. They are as follows. 1, to blaspheme devotees with dedicated life for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2, to consider names of demigods, the Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma to be equal to or independent of them, Lord Vishnu. 3, to disobey the orders of the spiritual master. 4, to blaspheme the Vedic scriptures and positions of Vedic versions. 5, to consider the glory of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6, to give some interpretation to the holy name of the Lord. 7, to commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy name. 8, to consider chanting of Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which often Vedas as fruitive activities, karma kanda. 9, to instruct the faithless person by the glories of the holy name. And 10, to not have complete faith in chanting the holy names and to maintain material attachments even after understanding so many instructions in this matter. It also no offense to being retained while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully guard against 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success, Krishna Prema. Now let us offer our most humble blessings unto all the Vaishnavas, devotees of the Lord. They are just like desired trees. They can fulfill the desires of everyone. They are full of compassion for the fallen incarnation souls. Vancha kalpatarubhyacha kripa sindhu vacha paritanam vaishnavibhyo namo namaha Tinanta Kuja Vaishnavarind Ki Jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shikyastakam Ki Jai. Chito Darpanama Janam Bhavamada Vagnivapanam Shri Akariva Chandrika Vitaranam Vidya Shadanam Sarvatmasnam Parampara Vijayati Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Namnamakari Vaudha Nija Sarva Shaktis Tatrarpita Niyamita Shmarane Nakala Yata Dushi Tava Kripaya Bhagavan Mamapi Durdhaiva Vidrishamiya Janina Nuraga Trinadapi Sinichena Tarorapi Sarishnuna Amanina Amanadena Kirtaniya sada hari. Na dhanam na janam na sundari kavitam vajagarish kamaye mama janmani janmanishari bhavata bhaktiraitu kitvayi vainanda tanuja kinkara paritama visame bhavambudo kripaya tava pada pankaja stitaduli sadrisham vichintaya nayanam galara shudarya vajanam gadagadharudhaya gira ulaka ilchitam vapukada tavanamagrahane bhavisyati juga itam nimishena chakyusha pravrusa itam sunya itam jagat sarvam govinda virayena asli shava padaratam pinashtama adarshana marmahatam karotuva jata tata vidadhatu lampato mat prana tastu saivana para Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sri Kyastakam Ki Jai Namo Mahavarannaya Krishna Prema Pradayati Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gaura Tvishe Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devam Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Shunnavadi Patsatyadi Satarine. Glory to the Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life for repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan moment is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which all is anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names you have invested all your transcendental energies. There are no different hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness you enable us to easily approach you by holy names, but I'm so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself Lord on the street. One should be more tolerant than his tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your cause of devotional service, birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I'm your eternal servitor. Yes, some or other, I'm following this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up, and will the hairs of my body stand on end to the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I'm feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he shall remain so, even if he handles me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is my worshipful Lord unconditionally.
Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasad Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nami Namaste Saraswati Devi Guru Namaste
Shri Guru Vrindan Mangala Charan Ki Jai. Om
Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chaksurunimitam Yena Tasma Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manovistam Swapitam Yena Bhutali Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Bandeham Shri Guru Shri Jitaha Pachkamlam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Sa Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakha Divitam Sa Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Desatarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Saraswati Tinamine Shivasavani Devi Dayitaya Kribhabdaya Krishna Sambandha Vigyana Dayane Prabhave Namaha Madhur Ujjvala Premadya Shri Rupa Nuga Bhaktita Shri Gaura Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namastate Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupa Nuga Viruddha Papasidanta Dvantaharine Namo Gaura Kishoraya Shakshak Vairagya Murtaye Vipralambara Sambhude Padambujayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Satchitananda Namine Gaura Shakti Swarupaya Rupa Nuga Varayate Gauravir Bhava Bhumestvam Nirdesta Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Sarvabhuma Sri Jagannathaya Te Namaha Vanchakalpatarabhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhebhacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Premapadaya Te Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gurujase Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktaram Bhaktartam Saktikam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Jayatam Suratura Pangur Mama Manda Matirgati Matsarva Swapadambujo Radha Madana Mohano Divya Dvindaranya Kalpadumata Shimad Ratnagara Simasito Shimad Radha Shilagovinda Devo Prastali Bihisi Vimana Smarami Shiman Rasa Rasa Rambivam Sivatatastita Karsan Venuswaner Gopir Gopinatak Sri Istuna Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanustute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Srimad Bhagavatam Grantaraj Ki Jai Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tinamini Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Desatarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 3 Chapter 8 Verse number 7. Proktam kilaitad bhagavatamena nivriti dharma virataya tena sanat kamaraya sakaha prishta Sankhya yana yanga dhritavrataya. Proktam was said, Kila, certainly, etat, this, Bhagavatamina, by Lord Sankarsana, Nivriti, renunciation, Dharma abhirataya, unto one who has taken this religious vow. Tena, by him, Sanat Kumaraya, unto Sanat Kumara. Sa, he, cha, also, aha, said, prista, when inquired of, Sankhyayanaya, unto the great sage Sankhyayana. Anga, my dear Vidura. Dritavrataya, unto one who has taken such a vow. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Lord Sankarsana thus spoke the purport of Srimad Bhagavatam to the great sage Sanat Kumara, who had already taken the vow of renunciation. Sanat Kumara also, in his turn, when inquired of by Sankhyayana Muni, explained Srimad Bhagavatam as he had heard it from Sankarsana. Purport by His Divine Grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. This is the way of the Parampara system. Although Sanat Kumara, the well-known great saintly Kumara, was in the perfect stage of life, still he heard the message of Srimad Bhagavatam from Lord Sankarsana. Similarly, when he was questioned by Sakyayana Rishi, he spoke to him the same message he had heard from Lord Sankarsana. In other words, unless one hears from the proper authority, one cannot become a preacher. In devotional service, therefore, 2 items out of the 9, namely hearing and chanting, are most important. Without hearing nicely, one cannot preach the message of Vedic knowledge. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Lord Sankarsana thus spoke the purport of Srimad Bhagavatam to the great sage Sanat Kumara, who had already taken the vow of renunciation. Sanat Kumara also, in his turn, when inquired of by Sakyayana Muni, explained Srimad Bhagavatam as he had heard it from Sankarsana. Text number 8. Sankyayana Paramahamsya Mukyo Vivaksamano Bhagavad Vibhuti Jagadasosmad Gurave Nivitaya Parasaratyata Prihaspatescha. Sankyayana, the great sage Sankyayana. Paramahamsya Mukhya, the chief of all transcendentalists. Vivaksamana, while reciting Bhagavat Vibhuti, the glories of the Lord. Jagada, explain. Sa, he, asmat, of me. Gurave, unto the spiritual master. Anvitaya, follow. Parasaraya, unto the sage Parasara. Ata, Brihaspate cha, also to Brihaspati. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The great sage Sankyayana was the chief amongst the transcendentalists, and when he was describing the glories of the Lord in terms of Srimad Bhagavatam, it so happened that my spiritual master, Parasara, and Brihaspati both heard it. Okay, so this is Maitreya Muni that's speaking this. So text number 9. Provacha mayam sadayalurukto Muni pulastyena purana madhyam Soham tavaitat katayami vatsa Shradalave nityam anurataya. Provacha said, Mayam, unto me, Sa, he, Dayalu, kind-hearted, Ukta, aforementioned, Muni, sage, Pulastyena, by the sage Pulastya, Puranam, Adyam, the foremost of all the Puranas. Sa, aham, that also I. Tava, unto you. Etat, this. Katayami, shall speak. Vatsa, my dear son. Shradalave, unto one who is faithful. Nityam, always. Anurataya, unto one who is a follower. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The great sage Parasara, as aforementioned, being so advised by the great sage Pulastya, spoke unto me the the foremost of the Puranas, Bhagavatam. I shall also describe this before you, my dear son, in terms of my hearing, because you are always my faithful follower. Now what's interesting here is that Bhagavatam existed before what we consider as the recitation of the Bhagavatam. So let's see what it says in the purport. The great sage of the name Pulastya is the father of all demoniac descendants. Once upon a time, Parasara began a sacrifice in which all the demons were to be burnt to death because his father had been killed and devoured by one of them. The great sage Vasistha Muni arrived at the sacrifice and requested Parasara to stop the deadly action, and because of Vasistha's position and respect in the community of sages, Parasara could not deny the request. Parasara, having stopped the sacrifices, Pulastya, the father of the demons, appreciated his Brahminical temperament and gave the blessing that in the future he would be a great speaker on the Vedic literatures called the Puranas, the supplements of the Vedas. Parasara's action was appreciated by Pulastya because Parasara had forgiven the demons out of his Brahminical power of forgiveness. Parasara was able to demolish all the demons in the sacrifice, but he considered, demons are so made that they devour living entities, men and animals. But why, on that account, should I withdraw my Brahminical qualification of forgiveness? As the great speaker of the Puranas, Parasara, first of all spoke on the Srimad Bhagavata Purana, because it is the foremost of all the Puranas. Maitreya Muni desired to narrate the same Bhagavatam he had heard from Parasara, and Vidura was qualified to hear it because of his faithfulness and his following the instructions received from superiors. So Srimad Bhagavatam is being narrated from time immemorial by the disciplic succession, even before the time of Vyasadeva. The so-called historians calculate the Puranas to be only a few hundred years old, but factually the Puranas existed from time immemorial before all historical calculations by the mundaners and speculative philosophers. And Prabhupada has said in other places that the Christians and the Muslims and the Jews, they hardly know more than what happened 3,000 years ago, or maximum 3,500 years ago. They have no knowledge of existence. In fact, the Christians have got mud on their face many times now in modern times because the scientists established that the world didn't begin 5,000 years ago like the mundaners say, or 3,500 years ago like they say, like the Christian church was saying for centuries. It started much earlier than that, millions and millions of years. So we see the Christian church has got it wrong about, and they've still got it wrong about animals have no soul. The Christian church had it wrong about the sun is going around the earth. The Christian church had it wrong about the time of creation. They say it happened around 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. It's absolutely wrong. There are a lot of other things they have wrong also, even today. So, therefore, why should we, and the Christians tried to force the residents of Bharat to accept the Christian timeline of only 5,000 years ago. And some of the dumbbells accepted that. And even up until today, they still accept that. But not the genuine devotees, they don't accept that nonsense. So we see how people try and force others, and during the British rule, they were trying to force the Hindus to disbelieve in the Vedas and only believe in the Bible. But the Bible has many mistakes in it. So why should we accept something inferior, vastly inferior, to the Vedic literature? But yet they were able to convince whole generations of people born in Bharat not to believe in the Vedas. And even today, there are people that don't believe in the Vedas, although they're born in Bharat. Okay, so today we're going to continue understanding some very interesting things about neutrality and equality. Now, if you want to have the two verses that really make it clear what these two very important points that are superior to prasanatma, for equality, it's the 5th chapter, 18th verse, Vidya Vinaya Sampane, Brahmane Gavi Hastani, Sunichaiva Swapakecha, Pandita Samadarshina. So Samadarshi means seeing with equal vision. And then if you want to know what neutrality is, then you read Bhagavad Gita, 5th chapter, 20th verse, Na praristyet priyam prapya, no dvijet prapya cha priyam, stira buddhir asambudho brahmavit brahmani stitaha. A person who neither rejoices upon achieving something pleasant, nor laments upon obtaining something unpleasant, who is self-intelligent, who is unbewildered, and who knows the science of God, is already situated in transcendence. So that is neutrality, not disturbed by anything, success or failure. So the symptom of the self-realized soul is, number one, he's not illusioned by the false identification of the body with his true self as soul. That's the first qualification of a self-realized soul. Then, he knows perfectly well that he's not this body, but is the fragmental portion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And number three, he therefore is not joyful in achieving something good, nor does he lament in losing anything which is related to his body. This steadiness of mind is called stira buddhi, or self-intelligence. He is therefore never bewildered by mistaking the gross body for the soul, nor does he accept the body as permanent and disregard the existence of the soul. This knowledge elevates him to the station of knowing the complete science of the absolute truth, namely Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. He thus knows his constitutional position perfectly well, without falsely trying to become one with the Supreme in all respects. This is called Brahma realization or self-realization. Such steady consciousness is called Krishna consciousness. So there you go. These are the two main verses. Now, today we're going to study something else related to this, and that is Bhagavad Gita 5.21. Vayaspar says, Vashaktatma vindat atmani yat sukham, sabrahma yoga yuktatma sukham akshayam asnute. Such a liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure, but is always in trance, enjoying the pleasure within. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he concentrates on the Supreme. Now, this is the difference between a vishayi, a sense gratifier, and a devotee. The sense gratifier is looking for happiness or pleasure without. So he's looking for eating all kinds of junk stuff, lobsters and mussels, and I don't know if you know what a mussel is. It's not a mussel like this, M-U-S-S-E-L. It's one of the dirtiest things you could ever eat, and people love to eat them. People love to, but in order to stand the taste of it, they put a lot of a condiment or sauce on it to sort of hide its very bland and horrible texture and taste. So, what does it say? You see it? What's a mussel? You have the. It's not your muscle. M-U-S-C-L-E.
So muscle is the common.
Your microphone is not on.
Mussel is the common name used for members of several families of
Of what?
bivalves mollusks from
Okay, that's the Latin name, mollusks.
mollusks, yeah,
Mollusks.
mollusks, yeah, from saltwater and freshwater habitats.
Okay, what's another name for it? It's like an oyster. Okay?
Yeah.
Oyster is
Oyster,
it's in the family of the oysters, but it's much more gross than oysters are already gross. And mussel is even more gross. Right. Okay, so the devotee, the karmi is looking for pleasure outside of their body. So they're looking to eat nonsense things. They're looking for prostitutes. They're looking for this. They're looking for that. Always outside. But the devotee, he's enjoying the pleasure within. So what is within? Does that mean he's getting pleasure out of the blood and the veins and the tendons and the ligaments and the gallbladder and the intestines and the stool? Is that what he's seeing within? What do you think? Why does it say, what's the pleasure within? Paramatma, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is in the heart of everyone. So, and then when he begins to have more interest in the pleasure within than the pleasure without, I mean outside of himself, he comes closer and closer to Krishna, and then he connects to the Krishna net. That means he begins to see Krishna's pastimes in the spiritual world, just like Sanjay. He's actually seeing Krishna in Kurukshetra, although he's sitting in Delhi. Or move back a little bit. So, this is the pleasure within that's possible for everyone. But one has to lose the attraction for the pleasure without, right? Eating mussels and oysters and crabs and lobsters. Those are the most horrible things to eat. One time I went to Cape Cod, which is in Massachusetts. It's way out into the ocean somewhat. It's not an island, but it's a cape. It looks like an island, but it's not. And it's surrounded by water on three sides. And I went there, and why? Because the special food there is lobster. Right? Lobsters are like a horrible-looking type of crustaceous being, and so and everyone was saying how wonderful it is to go way out to Cape Cod and eat lobster. So at that time I was not a devotee, so I ordered a lobster and they brought it in, and you need this special tool to break the outside hard shell of this animal, this creature, and it looks horrible, right? And then you start eating everything inside of the shell. Well, this was a completely whole lobster. So at one point, I started eating what was in the intestine of the lobster, and it was horrible. And I started spitting it out. And then I realized, they gave me the whole lobster with the intestine full. And this is supposed to be, something really wonderful, right? So it's completely gross and nonsense. I've never eaten lobster after that. So we see, if you buy lobster now in Safeway or these stores, they don't give you the intestine. They cut the parts off of the body of the lobster, and they just give you the inside part. But anyway, it's horrible, it's gross, and it's nonsense. But yet, people still eat them. People still go to Cape Cod today. I bet even Hindus do it, and eat lobster. And then worse than lobster, if you go like to Atlantic City or these states that are on the ocean, They eat oysters and mussels. Mussels are like gross. And the only way they can stand eating them is putting this condiment. Look at that word, what? C-O-N-D-I-M-E-N-T. Condiment is like what you would call a achar in Hindi. But it's not always a hot achar. It's like very light achar. Okay, what does it say, condiment?
A substance such as salt or ketchup that is used to add flavor to food.
Right, to add flavor. Because the mussel and the oyster is so gross, they have to put this on top of it for people to eat it. Because if they just give the raw mussel or the oyster, people won't eat it because it tastes like and looks like mucus and has the feel of mucus, right? Okay, so now you see how people are eating really horrible things on a big level in the United States. That's why they can't understand anything about Krishna. Now, you have even like priests and ministers and so-called preachers in Christianity and even in Judaism and of course in Islam, eating the same horrible nonsense. Now you know why they make mistakes, because their mind is full. It has been developed by these horrible foods that they eat. Right? So now, such a liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure, but is always in trance, enjoying the pleasure within. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he concentrates on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So you want to be happy? You don't need video games. You don't need, different, things for sense gratification. You just need to connect internally with Paramatma, and you'll be blissful eternally. See? And you'll be able, and you have a new television. This television is you seeing Krishna's pastimes through the heart. And this is possible because there's examples of Sanjaya and many others who connected to the Krishna net. Now, there's a quote by Yamunacharya, who's a great devotee. He's a Sri Vaishnava, and he's Krishna conscious. And he says, Yad avadi mamacheta Krishna padara vrinde, navanava rasa dhamani udyatam rantum asit, and so forth. He says, since I have been engaged in the transcendental loving service of Krishna, realizing ever new pleasure in him, whenever I think of sex pleasure, actually, it says, I spit at the thought, and my lips curl with distaste. Now, there's an alternative translation of this. And it says, since my heart has been overwhelmed by devotional service of Lord Krishna, I cannot even think of sex life. And if thoughts of sex come upon me, I at once feel disgust. This is Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 42nd verse, and Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila 1.10, and a lecture that Prabhupada gave on April 3rd, 1975. Okay, that alternative translation is not as, let's say, not as what you might, for some people, controversial as the first translation. Okay, so Prabhupada says, a person in Brahma Yoga or Krishna consciousness is so absorbed in the loving service of the Lord that he loses his taste for material sense pleasure altogether. Now some people will say, oh, that's horrible. If I lose the taste for sense gratification, I may as well die. One of my uncles said that to me once. He said, what do you people do? He was very antagonistic. And I said, well, I'll tell you what we don't do, and then I'll tell you what we do. I said, we don't eat meat, fish, or eggs, or chicken. We don't have liquor or marijuana or anything like that, and even coffee and tea. And We don't engage in any type of illicit activities like sex and so forth out of marriage. And we don't eat meat. I mean, we don't engage in intoxication. And we don't gamble, right? We don't gamble. He said, well, if I was forced to do that, I would commit suicide, because those are the only things that give me pleasure in life. Now, you see how stupid people are, you know. And he meant it too. He exactly meant it, and he was very adamant. And he said, then he told me, I'm going to tell you an old story in our tradition. He said, one time there was a discussion between these great people that what is the definition of a stupid person or a donkey. And after a long discussion, they decided a donkey-like person is someone that doesn't eat meat, doesn't gamble, doesn't take intoxication, and doesn't engage in illicit sex. So you see how far he is immersed in ignorance, you know. So, and that was one of my uncles. You can just imagine what it's like to deal with people like that, you know. So I didn't get upset, but I told him, look, you're talking nonsense. You don't know what you're saying, and if you continue like this, you're going to have a horrible death, and you'll take birth as some animal. He said, well, what's wrong with being an animal? See, I mean, he had no way of saving himself from ignorance. Anyway, here it says, since I have been engaged in the transcendental loving service of Krishna, realizing ever new pleasure in him, whenever I think of sex pleasure, I spit at the thought. So Prabhupada says, a person in Brahma Yoga or Krishna consciousness is so absorbed in the loving service of the Lord that he loses his taste for material sense pleasure altogether. The highest pleasure in terms of matter is sex pleasure. The whole world is moving under its spell, and a materialist cannot work at all without this motivation. But a person engaged in Krishna consciousness can work with greater vigor without sex pleasure, which he avoids. That is the test in spiritual realization. Spiritual realization and sex pleasure go ill together. A Krishna conscious person is not attracted by any kind of sense pleasure due to his being a liberated soul. So the test to see if someone is spiritually realized or advanced spiritually is, do they still have attraction for sense gratification? And if they don't, then they have made significant advancement in spiritual life. If they still do, then Prabhupada says the following. He says, if someone still has attraction for sense gratification, they should never take sannyas. And sannyasi should not, if a sannyasi still, or if a person contemplating to become a sannyasi, if they still have attraction to sense gratification, they have a great chance of falling down. Therefore, they're not ready to take sannyas. Okay, so therefore, it says that now the Mayavadis, they're always talking about kaivalya, or as they also say, kaivalya means that one is alone. They shun society. They stay away from society. They're isolated so that nothing disturbs them in their meditation. So they go to some remote place, like a cave in the Himalayas or somewhere like that, to meditate without any distraction. So, in the fourth canto, 20th chapter, 10th verse, there's a verse that says, Parit yakta guna samyak darsano visadaya saha. Santim me samavastanam brahma kaivalyam asnute. Okay, so it says, when the heart is cleansed of all material contamination, the devotee's mind becomes broader and transparent and can see things equally. At that stage of life, there is peace, and one is situated equally with me as Satchitananda Vigraha. This is a beautiful verse. Everyone should learn this verse. So in the purport, Prabhupada says, the Mayavadi conception of Kaivalya and that of the Vaishnava community is different. In other words, here's the same word used by the Mayavadis and the same word used by the Vaishnavas, but there's a difference in the understanding of this one word. And this is a very significant word because Kaivalya means that, well, let's see what it means for the Mayavadi. The Mayavadi thinks that as soon as one is free from all material contamination, he merges into the existence of the Supreme, either into the Brahma Jyoti or into the body of the Lord. The Vaishnava philosopher's conception of Kaivalya is different. He understands both his position and the position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other words, there's a difference between him and Krishna. Although there are many similarities, both are eternal. Both experience eternity, bliss, and knowledge. And both don't have a material body. They identify with the eternal soul, right? So there's a tremendous amount of similarity between the jiva and Krishna, but yet the jiva understands there is a difference also, because the jiva is only conscious of his body, but Krishna is conscious of all bodies. And there's billions and billions and trillions of different bodies in one universe, and he's conscious of all the bodies in all the universes. So this is something that the jiva cannot do. So the jiva realizes, look, I share a lot of qualities with the Lord, but I'll never be equal to the Lord or greater than the Lord. I'm always subordinate, and therefore my position should be to render service to the Lord. So therefore it says, in the uncontaminated condition of Krishna consciousness, the living entity understands that he is the eternal servitor of the Supreme, and that is called Brahman realization, real Brahman realization. He doesn't consider himself equal to the Lord or merging into the Lord. The spiritual perfection of the living entity is this real Brahman realization, not the fake Brahman realization of the Mayavadis. The rapport is very easily achieved. Now, what does rapport mean? It means a close and harmonious relationship in which people or groups concerned understand each other's feelings or ideas and communicate well. Well, the devotee in rapport with the Supreme Personality of Godhead understands that he's eternally subordinate to the Lord, and he's the eternal servant to the Lord, and the Lord is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and no one is equal to or greater than him. So, therefore, the Kaivalya, or this merging into the existence of the Lord of the Mayavadis, is different than the Kaivalya of the devotees. Even though they are one with the Lord, in agreement with the Lord and his instructions, but still they maintain, the Vaishnavas maintain their individuality, and Krishna maintains his individuality. Whereas the Mayavadis, they deny their own individuality to merge into the Lord and to believe falsely that they have become the Lord also. So there's a huge difference between the Kaivalya of the Mayavadi and the Kaivalya of the devotee. Although it's the same word. It's the same word, but many words are the same, but used by the Mayavadis and used by the Buddhists because they got all their knowledge from the Vedas. But they have different interpretations of these words. So when you hear a Mayavadi speak, he uses many of the same words that we use. But his understanding of those words are different almost all the time. Okay. So then Prabhupada says, in the uncontaminated condition of Krishna consciousness, the living entity understands that he is the eternal servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that is called Brahman realization, which is the spiritual perfection of the living entity. Okay, now as stated in Bhagavad Gita, when one is engaged in transcendental loving service to the Lord, he is immediately situated on the transcendental platform of Kaivalya, or Brahman realization. So this word Kaivalya is coming from Kevala. Kevala means oneness. So the Mayavadi philosophy is called Kevala Advaita, the absolute oneness. And it's wrong. But see, they're using the same words, Kevala Advaita. We use the word Advaita also, but what is the real meaning of Advaita? Their understanding of Advaita and our understanding of Advaita are different. Our understanding of Advaita is Krishna is non-different than his body. So, therefore, his body is not material. It's a spiritual body. And he's non-different than it. Whereas we are different from our body. So we are not Advaita right now. We have a material body that's covering our eternal spiritual body. But Krishna's body is not material. Therefore, there's no difference between Krishna and his body. That's the real Advaita. Now, the Mayavadi concept of Advaita is that they believe that they become one with the Brahman effulgence by denying their individuality and merging into Brahman. That's their understanding of Advaita. And that's completely different than our understanding of Advaita. Okay, now, what does Advaita mean? Dvaita means two, and Advaita means one. As soon as you put an A in front of Dvaita, it becomes oneness. So our oneness with Krishna, we retain our individuality, but our oneness with Krishna is agreeing to follow Krishna's instructions. So in that case, we're oneness, just like in a family. As long as, I'm going to give you a very stark example now. As long as the wife agrees with her husband, they are in oneness. Now, just 2 days ago, or no, a week or two ago, in Idaho, was it Idaho? Anyway, Utah, I'm sorry, Enoch, Utah. It's a small town, very small town. And almost, I'd say 9/10 of the population of Utah are Mormons. So there was a Mormon family in this small town, and the husband and wife had 5 kids. So Mormons usually have a lot of kids. They go up sometimes up to 10, 15 kids, right? They believe in reproduction. Fine, we're not arguing about that. But one thing that they hold sacred is called marriage. Well, marriage is a sacred thing, but they especially believe that husband and wife can become eternally together, especially if they go through all the initiations of the Mormon Church. There's a whole bunch of initiations they have to go through, just like we have 3 major initiations we have to go through. They have a similar type of thing. And once they get the full initiation, then they believe that the family becomes eternal, right? And they'll all go back together to God. Well, in this Mormon family, the wife wanted to get a divorce. And she went to a lawyer, and he wrote the lawyer papers up for divorce, and she gave it to her husband. What did he do? He got his gun, shot his wife, shot his 5 kids, killed them all, and then shot himself. This is what happens. Now, it doesn't always happen so severely as this, But this is what happens when you try and break the sacred vow of marriage. The sacred vow of marriage is we will live together forever. Okay, now forever means until we both die, or forever could mean we go back to Godhead together, right? Most of the time it's when we die, of course, it's all over. But in the Mormon church and even in Krishna consciousness, you get married, when you say, we'll never be separated, that could go right into eternity, right? If both the husband and wife are genuinely Krishna conscious. So here we see there are some similarities between the Mormon idea of eternal family and the Krishna conscious idea of eternal family. But at one point, things become eternal as long as there's a relationship with God. So anyway, here we see that this kaivalya, or merging into the effulgence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead of the Mayavadis, is not the understanding of the devotees. The understanding of devotees is that no one is ever equal or greater than Krishna. Everyone is subordinate to him. So there's no question of merging. There is a question of surrendering and then following the instructions of the Lord. Then there is oneness. So this kaivalya, the actual meaning of it in Sanskrit is there's no duplicate, no equal, no one equal to Param Brahman or to Krishna. That's the real meaning of kaivalya. And the Mayavadis have taken a different understanding, which means the kaivalya means merging into the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or into the Brahman, the Mayavad concept of the Brahman effulgence. Okay, so this is why people get confused, especially in Bharat, because the same words are being used, but they have different meanings for the Mayavadis and different meanings for the Vaishnavas. Now, whose meaning is right? Well, we have to go back to Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam. So, what does it say? So Krishna says in the second chapter, verse number, 11, Natvevaham jatu nasam natvam nemi janadipaha nachaive na bhavishyama sarvivayama takparam. He says, never was there a time, O Arjuna, when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. So this verse establishes the full eternality of Krishna and the jiva. He says, we existed in the past, we exist in the present, and we will exist in the future. That means before we were born, we were existing. Before we were born in this body, we were existing. In this body, we're existing. And when we leave the body, we continue to exist. So Krishna is claiming full eternality for the jiva and for himself. So then, how can it be that your individuality is destroyed when you merge into Brahman effulgence? No, you maintain your individuality, but you have artificially denied yourself any desires and any identification with your soul. So, therefore, but you can't maintain that position. Eventually, there'll be a little desire in the mind, and immediately you fall down. Okay, and then Krishna says, Nityo nityanam chaitanas chaitananam eko bahunam yo vidadati kamam tam atmastam ye nupasyanti diras tesam santi saswati nitarasam. This is Katha Upanishad 2.2.13, which says, Nityo nityanam chaitanas chaitananam. He's saying that I, Krishna, and you, the jiva, and all jivas, we are all eternal, and we all have consciousness. Eko bahunam yo vidadati kamam. But I am supplying food to everyone, and you are receiving it. So that's the difference. Krishna is the supplier of sustenance, and we're the receiver of sustenance, although we are also eternal, and we also have consciousness, just like Krishna. So we are one and different. That's the whole point. We are one with eternity, bliss, and knowledge with Krishna, and we're different because he is maintaining us. Without his help, we cannot exist. Right? Okay, so all this is in the Bhagavad Gita, but the Mayavadis misinterpret all of it. And if you ever read, and I hope you don't, a commentary on Bhagavad Gita written by a Mayavadi, and one of the worst is Dr. Radhakrishnan, who was the president of India at one time. And then later on, when he retired, he started writing nonsense books. His Bhagavad Gita is full of nonsense, full of misinterpretations. I'll bring it in one of these days. I'll show you some of those misinterpretations. It's egregious. Egregious is a good word. Look that up. E-G-R-E-G-I-O-U-S. Egregious. Okay, so we'll stop right there. Are there any questions?
So, Hare
What's
Krishna Maharaj.
egregious mean?
Outstandingly bad.
Okay, give him the microphone. Oh, you have it?
Yeah. Outstandingly bad or
Yes.
shocking.
Egregious means really
Bad and shocking, yeah.
Right? So the Mayavadis are really bad. Right? They get so many things wrong. Not only the Mayavadis, I'm giving you examples of the Christian church. Also, they got a lot of things that are really wrong. And because of that, their priests oftentimes fall down because they're drinking wine, they're eating meat. How can they maintain celibacy by drinking wine and eating meat? You tell me. It's very difficult. Right. Okay, go ahead.
So, Maharaj, we talk about this when basically in the purport we read about today, this chapter 3,
Canto 3,
chapter 8 and
verse number 9.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In this, so looks like you mentioned, and I think here Prabhupada also mentioned that Bhagavatam is exists way before even Vasudeva.
Spoke, yeah.
Yeah, spoke. So actually, so how do we understand that? Like, means it was just like Vedas that it was exist all the time, but Vasudeva has compiled them. Similarly, Bhagavatam, because Narada Muni asked him to basically
Write the
Bhagavatam. So is it just a compilation of Bhagavatam? Or it exists, since it says that it exists before, but we say that, okay.
No, the four nutshell verses existed before.
Okay.
Right. Now, you're saying I'm giving lectures on the four nutshell verses, right? This thing could go on for months.
Yeah.
So that's what happens. If you know the four nutshell verses and you know the philosophy, even though there's only four verses, you could speak months and months, maybe even years, on those four verses. So Sukadeva Goswami, he got those four verses and he expanded it tremendously. You see. So if you consider the let's say the short version of the Bhagavatam, it's the four nutshell verses. But anybody who knows the philosophy of Krishna consciousness could speak for a long, long time just on those four verses, and you would have the gist or the essence of the whole Bhagavad Purana. That's how powerful. You could lecture just on the first verse for months and years. That's how powerful the Bhagavatam is. Okay, but it's amazing. It's saying that I mean, you see how the scientists, and the philosophers, and the Indology people, the people are experts on India. They got it wrong. They say, "Oh, Bhagavatam was only written a few hundred years ago." That's nonsense. Here it's saying, the so-called historians calculate the Puranas to be only a few hundred years old, But factually, the Puranas existed from time immemorial, from the beginning of time, before all historical calculations by the mundaners and speculative philosophers. You see? So your question is very good. Now we see how much cheating and lying and nonsense is in society today. And it's being taught in India. Did you think the Vedas were only a few hundred years old? No? Nobody said that to you?
Yeah. Everywhere, Maharaj. Even we can see the reference. Yeah, few and thousands years back.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
They
Everybody
teach
says
it in India to their kids, right? Even in the Sanskrit schools,
Yeah.
right? You see how much the British, completely screwed up India by misinterpreting things. And unless you understand this, you just go along, you go with the flow and just accept all this nonsense that they're saying. Unless you actually read Prabhupada's purports, you remain in illusion. What? You saying to me that Bhagavatam was there from the beginning of time? No, that's not true. Vyasadeva spoke the Bhagavatam for the first time, you see. Haribol.
Yeah. And the second thing, Maharaj, just a clarification. I think we talk about Keval. So
Kevala.
Keval and Kaivalya are two different words, right?
Kaivalya comes from Kevala.
Oh, acha. Yeah, okay. Keval is absolute, right? Keval is absolute.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll stop right there. Thank you very much. All glories to Prabhupada ki jai. So they're using the same words, but with different meanings. What could be worse than that? That's the worst thing in the world. They're using exactly the same words with different meanings.
Each language has some of the words multiple meanings.
What?
Every language has few words are like having multiple meanings where you use the context and
No, but we're talking about wrong meanings.
wrong meanings.
You see how many words in the dictionary are not complete definitions of the words, or part of their definition. It might be wrong also. Like when you look up yoga, they say it's a Hindu practice. There's nothing Hindu about yoga. Yoga's been there way before the name Hindu came into existence, and it's not reserved for a certain group of people or a religion, right? You see, it's all nonsense, but yet people believe it because they see it in the dictionary. The dictionary can be very misleading, very, very misleading.
One clarification, Maharaj, on this oneness Advaita.
Yeah.
You had mentioned Krishna is not different than his body,
Yes.
but we are
Different than the body.
So my question is, in spiritual world also we are still different, our spiritual body and soul? Or
No.
they are one.
Yeah. But see, now you know why anybody who has a body covering their soul, it's very difficult for them to understand Krishna. Because Krishna and his body are the same. There's no difference. So,
So in spiritual world we are also one.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah. You are Advaita. Real Advaita. Okay, look who's going to chant. You going to chant or play the kartals? Kartals? You don't want to chant? Okay. That's okay. We got other chanters here.
My dad normally helps me, so and he's going downstairs to help with the kitchen, so I can't chant. I don't know the words, all of them.
Well, if you don't play the kartals, then you can just hold this and know all the verse.
Actually, I'm looking at that.
Oh, okay, you can do that too. Yeah.
Shri Guru Charana पद्मा केवल भक्ति सद्मा
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevalavakati Sadma
Bannamoy Savadana Made Jahara Prasade Bai Nivavatariya Jai
Janara Prasade Bai Evavatariya Jai
Krishna Prapti Ho
Krishna Prapti Hoya Hoite
Jahara Prasade Bai Evavatariya Jai Krishna Prapti Ho Jai Hoite Gurumukha Padma Vakya Chitit Koriya Kya
Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitte Koriya Kya
और ना कोई ओ माने आशा
Arana Koriya Mane Asa
चक्षुदान दिलो जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
You missed the verse.
कराना पतना देवा तागति
Ati Eise Utamagati
जय प्रसाद पूरे सर्व आशा
Ye Prasade Pune Sarva Asa
चक्षुदान दिलो जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
Chakshudan Dila Jay Janme Janme Prabhu Se
दिव्यज्ञान में प्रकाशित
Divya Gani De Prakashito
प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जाते
Prema Bhakti Jaoite Avidya Vinasajate
विधि कोई जहर चरित
Vedika Janara Charito
श्री गुरु करुण सिंधु आदम जनर बंधु
Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adanjanara Bandhu
लोके ना लोके रजीवाना
Lokena Lokena Jivana
हा हा प्रभु करो दया देह मोरे पद छाया
Aha Prabhu Pura Doya Deya Mure Padashaya
एबे गाइस गुशु त्रिभुवाना शील प्रभु पाद पिता पवाना
Prabhupada Patita Pavana
शील प्रभु पद जय प्रभु पद जय प्रभु पद
Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada
जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरु Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamine
Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Veshnaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamine
Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Bhashata Vishatarine
Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavani Bhaskatya Yazatarine
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Garajar Shrivacharit Gaur Bhakta Vrinda
Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Nittai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nittai Gaura Hari Bol
Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitya Gaura Hari Bol. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Pararajagacha Astatara Satara Shimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Shikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath San Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Shri Mayapura Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Ganga Maya Ki Jai Jamuna Maya Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, Patita Pavani Ki Jai, Gaura Premanandi. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Buddha Visamanta Mukti Vedanta. Namaste Saraswati Devi Guru Vani Vitarani Nirvisesa Sunivani Paskati Sutta. The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain the pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet with awe and reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From him, ecstatic prema emanates. By him, ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, and Lord and master of devotees. O Master, be merciful unto us. Give us the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread throughout all the three worlds. We take shelter of your lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya.